Ken James and Jason McKittrick. Brought to you by CryptoCurium.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to another edition of Learning Lovecraft. I'm your host, Jason McKittrick, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, the traveler on the path, Ken James.
How are we doing?
We're doing well.
I wanted to get a little sensual there. I don't know what that was.
Sensual?
Yeah, how are we doing?
Well, some have described the story as a love story.
Yeah, kind of seems to be.
A little bit.
A little obsession there.
Yeah, and by this story, I mean Beyond the Wall of Sleep, by American weird fiction author H.P. Lovecraft, the focus of this podcast.
Yes.
Not just this episode, this podcast.
The whole thing.
The whole thing. Why would we do this, you would say?
Because Ken is uncultured and needs to know.
I wouldn't say it's that. I'd say it's more of a, like we said in the first episode, it was, we know where all these things come from. Yeah. Ken's a huge horror fan, so am I, and to see where a lot of these things come from is amazingly most of these stories.
Yes, and I have a humble spirit, so any chance to self-deprecate, I'll take.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's only up after that, you know?
Wise words, sir.
And the thing is, we're doing this, and yeah, like there's all these $5 words I'm learning, and all these things that are going around. But this story in particular, it got me out of my almost panicky of the last one.
And you read them back to back, yeah?
I did read them back to back, and Polaris put me in a weird spot. And the subject matter is similar, but the telling of this one, I was like, okay, my feet are on the ground.
Yeah.
I'm not, my head's not spinning out of control,
right,
because I have a clear baddie, a clear goodie, a clear guy searching, like it was.
Did Lovecraft pull the good cop, bad cop thing on you?
He did. And I was like, oh, I'm back in my wheelhouse,
He came with a plate of dononuts after that.
Yeah.
There you go.
And then there's like a spirit buddy cop movie halfway through,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, whew, all right. I'm back in my comfort zone.
That's wonderful.
It is.
All right, so Beyond the Wall of Sleep, written in 1919 and first published in the amateur publication Pine Cones in October 1919.
Pine Cones, huh?
Yeah. Before we get going, I want to do our little bibliography section. We're going to be pulling from, as maybe almost every episode, from S.T. Joshi, I Am Providence, Volume 1, and an H.P. Lovecraft Encyclopedia, also with David E. Schultz. And then also this week, we're going to be pulling from, glad I could pull from this book finally, it's the new annotated H.P. Lovecraft by Leslie S. Klinger. And it's a great book.
I want to just shout you out real quick. The amount of work you do for this it's inspiring.
I have a lot of books with a lot of sticky notes in
yeah,
it.
but it's great. It's great to see, because we do our other podcasts and stuff like this, and we pull from the internet and stuff like this. But the first time I walked in, we were getting ready to go. I'm back in college, and I see him. He's got his books. Jay's doing a lot of work on this, and I'm proud to be led through through this world by your hand, sir.
Thank you.
As the traveler.
Well, hopefully this is going to be a lot of fun, and maybe I'm a little, hopefully I'm the Dr. Frankenstein and you'll be my monster at the end. Aw. You know the ways to my heart, sir. He knows the ways. High praise, Jason. High praise. I think it's important that you did pull that out, that this is certainly very similar ideas, but definitely different in tone and theme, and it's not definitely has its feet on the ground. I think that's an important distinction. So there's something that I pulled here from the Joshi's I Am Providence. Beyond the Wall of Sleep is Lovecraft's first quasi-science fiction tale. Quasi because the field of science fiction cannot be said to have been in existence at this time.
Right.
And would not be for another decade or so. But the fact that the extraterrestrial entity in the tale cannot meaningfully be termed supernatural makes this story an important foreshadowing of those later works that abandon the supernatural altogether for what could be termed the supernormal.
All right, man. So the term's extraterrestrial there.
Yeah.
I was going on the idea of dimensions.
Okay, and that's fine.
But yeah, but okay.
Yeah.
I see what he was saying with extraterrestrial, and after reading the story, I could see why that would be the terminology.
Mm-hmm.
And one good thing about this is you get a hillbilly to laugh at, which made it, like, after Polaris, I'm going to be honest, Polaris really did.
Yeah.
It hit a chord.
Okay.
It hit a chord, and once again, it's 3 pages, and you're like, how can this affect because what it does in your own brain?
Sure.
This one, I'm like, ooh, is this more of the same?
No.
And then I was like, oh, I get a hillbilly to giggle at, and a nice a guy who's in a low rank position, and then he breaks out tools like and devices. I was like, whoa! I this one.
Yeah,
I wasn't expecting that curveball.
Yeah,
because I'm thinking like
there's some science in there,
right? But also the pseudoscience of
well, it's all pseudoscience.
Sure. But like I have the tool. Like, I fabricated this tools, and like I'm picturing in my head, and I'm sure we'll get to it. But like, there was like little zany aspects to it that I was like, oh, okay, comfort. This is comfort,
right? And
me not just being in my head, thinking about why I dream.
Right. So let's get into it here. A former intern and a worker of a mental hospital relates his experience with Joe Slater.
Joey Slates.
Yep. An inmate who died at the facility a few weeks after being confined as a criminally insane murderer. He done that guy dirty.
Yeah.
He describes Slater as a typical denizen of the Catskill Mountain region who corresponds exactly with the white trash of the South.
Yeah. So let's do this.
Go.
He wrote white trash.
He did.
We're not calling people white trash.
No.
This is in the book, but also the guy's white trash.
No, I mean it's clearly he made him this way for a reason. For when he's later on with him being the vessel for this thing, and so I mean, and for whom laws and morals are non-existent, and whose general mental status is probably below that of any other Native American people. Okay. Okay.
These are the early stories.
Yeah. Yep. It don't matter. Although Slater's crime was exceedingly brutal and unprovoked, he had an absurd appearance of harmless stupidity, quote unquote.
Think Lenny from A Mice of Men.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And the doctors guessed his age at about 40. During the third night of his confinement, Slater's had the first of his quote unquote attacks. He burst out from an uneasy sleep and into a frenzy which was so violent that it took 4 orderlies to restrain and straitjacket him. I just wanted to pull the quote here from the story. He says, "At length, after temporarily felling one of his detainers with a sudden blow, he had flung himself upon the other in a demoniac ecstasy of bloodthirstiness, shrieking fiendishly that he would jump high in the air and burn his way through anything that stopped him."
Yeah, he did say that. So that at that point, right? So in that point of me reading the story, I'm like, is this like the Human Torch in another? Like, I'm trying to like put my thought process in like what he's talking about, like jump through.
Yeah,
and like you're like, no, this guy's just like jumping and trying to say that he can fly. I was like, okay, man.
Hey, man, they're probably used to it.
Right.
So, for nearly 50 minutes, he gave vent to an incredible rant. The words were in the voice and couched in the paltry vocabulary of Slater, but the onlookers could construe from the inadequate language a vision of green edifices of light, oceans of space, strange music, and shadowy mountains and valleys. But most of all, did he dwell upon some mysterious blazing entity that shook and laughed and mocked at him. This vast, vague personality seemed to have done him a terrible wrong, and to kill it in triumphant revenge was his paramount desire. In order to reach it, he would soar through abysses of emptiness, burning every obstacle that stood in his way.
So we have an epic tale here.
Yes.
Right? Once again, pulls you out of the whatever your own, thought process is. It's like, no, okay, we got a cool, almost superhero-like other side story here.
Yeah.
So this was almost like, it's like, he was like, I can do a comic book. Like that's what it felt like. I could do that.
pre-comic book, baby.
Yeah, right. But think about that.
Yeah.
That's where I kind of went. I was
Okay.
like, huh.
Interesting analysis. Okay.
Yeah. He's like, when I sleep, I'm this this entity, this light bearer. And the idea that this like country bumpkin is like speaking in words that he can't even understand.
Yeah.
That's the coolest part.
Yeah. That it's that, clearly whatever it is it's like still in his it's still through his vessel, so like it's through his instrument, so it's coming out in this way, but at the same time it's still like, oh, that's
like, it's like trying to play an untuned guitar.
Right. Oh yeah, that's a good analogy.
I have some good stuff sometimes.
You have lots of good stuff. The ranting stopped as suddenly as it had started. This was the first of what would become nightly attacks of a similar nature. The peripheral, otherworldly images of Slater's visions were different and more fantastic with each successive night, but always there was the central theme of the blazing entity and its revenge.
So I want to talk about that.
Okay.
Right? So the blazing entity. We do get a description of them when they're brothers in spirit and stuff like that, which we'll get to. But see, anything in my mind, and here's what I don't like about my imagination. If I'm thinking of a blazing entity, like, it doesn't scare me because I can't think of something that's like, a fiery thing. Like, I'm just thinking of like a, like, I don't know.
Okay.
Like, and I'm trying to I guess change my imagination in the way of like, what would be scary that's this blazing entity. But the point that this guy or this spirit that's, in our boy Slater, like, it didn't take him out, and he's still chasing it. Yeah. Right? So, like, I'm like, is this thing so scary because Slater's still alive and he's trying to take it on? Right. And he's recruiting other people. I don't know. Right. And that's, once again, that's why, like, my anxieties kind of came back, because I was like, I seen behind the curtain. Kind of,
I think there's many curtains to see behind.
I'm sure
there's curtains behind curtains.
I'm sure. This one, I'm just like, I'm okay with the one curtain.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
But later on, once we get to conclusions, I want you to give me a depiction of what you're seeing as this blazing entity.
Okay, sure. At the end. So the doctors were perplexed with Slater's case. Where did this backward man like Slater get such visions when surely illiterate, rustic guy, how would he have any exposure to like anything like fairy tales or like fantasy tales or stories?
Can't read, obviously never read. They don't have that out in his.
So they kind of already get this idea. It's like, I mean, it's,
There's a funny part where they try to tell you just how dumb this man is by how bad his teeth is a couple times. Right. Yeah, they focus in on that a couple times.
And then also, the fantastic tales that he's telling, right? Then they realize that he's dying.
Yeah.
So it's like, I remember the first time maybe I don't remember the first time I read this, but I remember something that occurred to me. It was like, right away, it was like, whatever he's a vessel of is burning his body up.
Right.
He can't contain whatever it is.
There is a movie I can reference to this, but we'll get to that at the end.
Okay,
I feel.
So then we get to the part where this undergraduate, the intern, he built a device for two-way telepathic communication, which he had tested with a fellow student with no result.
So the Ghostbusters, it's fabricating a tool, and I love how he described it as like, years ago. Yeah, like years ago, I was working on this device. Yeah, because of my own fascinations, and like it's the device you're working on was being able to use telepathy for another person,
a cosmic radio, if you will.
Right. And like, it's crazy because like from what I know of Lovecraft and what I've already read, it's like, whoa, you're throwing in crazy devices. Yeah. But I'm a greenhorn, so I don't know. I don't know if there's many more of these in there.
Yeah, there's more to come.
Okay. I was taken by surprise of like, oh man, he's using like tools and stuff. That's cool.
Yeah. So, and it kind of comes out of left field, right? Like, you don't know, like, what?
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, when I was in college...
Right. Well, because the way he's explaining it, right? So, like, he's talking about his position at the place. He's like, I'm a low-ranking guy here. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, so if you're a low-ranking guy, but you have all this expertise in, like, these things you're doing, it's like, this guy's aloof. Well, let's say that. And he becomes fascinated with Mr. Slater.
Yeah.
And that was the fun of it. It was me trying to like nail down what kind of guy this is, you know, and it just made me smile. I'm like, so this guy's like tinkering. He's like a low rate Doc Brown. He's like tinkering, and he has these ideas, and he's using all this stuff that's so antiquated. Like at the time, it's like you know. But once again, that's the charm, right? Like that's the charm of it. It's like this guy, and of course there's Dread Ahead. Right?
Oh yeah.
So you get a little bit of like this, you know, cute, like fun, I'm, you know, you have a montage of him, you know, you're the best, all right, yeah. But like, you get this whole idea of like him back in you know college, working on this telepathy machine. And then he's like, oh, I have to dig it out. He's like, I got to dig it out. You know, and you're like,
it's all drawn on napkins, like the Iron Man suit. Yeah. He's like, I built this. Yeah. It's like, okay.
Yeah, you're like, it's not even napkins. They didn't even have napkins. It's like, it's on parchment. I don't know what you would say.
I think they would have napkins in 1919.
That was handkerchiefs, bro.
Okay, fine. All right, so the device it's designed around the principle that thought was a form of this like radio energy,
like atoms. He said like atoms spinning in like this. I don't know if it's atoms, but yeah,
and without thinking about ethics at all, without a care, he's like,
ethics be damned.
Yeah. Well, you know, he's white trash.
Yeah. Well, that's
and he's dying. So maybe
this is a very charming story. I all the bad, brutal stuff in there, you can kind of like go, oh, like an '80s movie. Like that's what it kind of reminded me of. Like, you're like,
you could see he's trying to get to this place, and he's like, this other stuff, whatever. We're trying to get to this,
and we want to be there with him. So we just go, no. I want to see this experiment.
Yeah, we didn't have to go to the part. Hey, he signed this paper, said I could use my weird shit on him.
Yeah,
they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, no one cares.
Right. So he attached himself with Slater to the device as Slater's there dying. With the device switched on, he received a message from a light being whose experience had been what were transmitted through Slater's medium, right? So
what I got from that was like he used him as a bridge to get his mind to connect to his to go to that realm.
Yeah,
and then he met the being inside Slater, and like they went on a mission. They did a side mission together.
Yeah, kind of side missions. So you get this. They try a few times, right? And then it's like, then they finally get it to occur, and there's the weird music that starts playing.
Yeah, that's what he gets first, which is really cool.
Yeah. And it's like, I haven't looked into it because this isn't one of the stories I go back to very often because it's not in the Cthulhu mythos, and it's not. There's nothing in here that I can sculpt. Maybe I should sculpt the weird, Doc Brown headpiece,
or a light being,
well, how do you sculpt that? It's non-corporeal. It's the whole idea.
Figure it out, Jason.
You figure it out. So yeah.
What if I did that? What if I did? I was like, here's a light being.
Okay. I'd be into it. So they have the music and then visions of it's this like spectacular like beauty, right?
Yeah.
It's like on this other side, it's
I imagine
music and beauty.
Yeah, and I imagine it'd be like you know how space, like it's like the compression and everything, but if you get to those like the pillars of the pillars of creation, and those like different space bodies of like. It's just beautiful. I just like took it to the like they're floating in space where the cosmos is beautiful, and it's switched on that, like,
Yeah.
where we hear like in space, it's like, no, it's not that pressure.
Yeah.
You're just a being that can appreciate it all.
Right. It's above that. It's on a different. I think the whole idea that he brings into here, I don't know if it's purposeful, but the thought is a radiant energy, but maybe this other side is also a different wavelength kind of thing that's going on, because floating in these, like, luminous body type things and hearing music, and it's it's like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it is nice.
It's like,
and you had a buddy. He had a buddy.
Yeah, you got your quest buddy.
Yeah,
and it's kind of pure, and it is kind of beautiful to the idea that it's like, well, it doesn't matter who. It's just another being that you get to be there with. So I think that's why. Even reading it myself, but I've heard, I'm certain I've heard other people say that this is kind of like a love story, where it's like, it's the two of them. They're just two, not to use the phrase again, because I said it in the beginning of the episode, they're two travelers on the path. Yeah. Like, but they get to do it together. Yeah.
And the love story that I can totally see that is because through one's interest of trying to find out what's going on with this guy, he even says, you're the only one in this space that has ever sought this out, and now you're my brother in light. Yeah. And, like, you've made it to this other side through, and it seemed like the other entity that was in Slater, didn't even care about how or what it did, like how he got there. Yeah. But it's like, you're the only one, and then he starts talking about the time and, like, where they are. Maybe I'll see you again here. Yeah. And there. So the love story of it, absolutely. Yeah. But what kind of love are we talking about?
It's an extra dimensional kind of love kind of thing.
It's
and I think I use love as a word where it's like, that's the mode to experience all this through, is like a mode of love, because you got the music, you've got the beautiful things. It's like anything not of that wavelength, like the opposite, the bad, evil kind of things, it's just not here. So the only way you're going to experience this thing is through this, like, it's just awesome all the time. And it's a cozy blanket. It's all this amazing stuff, all the things that you want to feel.
And it's like, we're going to go hunt down this dude.
But then they throw in that Slater's body had in fact been occupied all his life by this, I have it described as extraterrestrial entity, but I would almost say ultra-terrestrial entity. Because yes, it is extraterrestrial, but I think that kind of, like, it doesn't explain it well enough. I think it's more...
It points to our dimension, which...
Yeah. Well, extraterrestrial means alien to me, so it's like, well, that suggests it comes from a planet. Like, ultra-terrestrial or, just some kind of, like... other
interdimensional,
they're here, interdimensional beings that for some reason has this, like, burning desire for revenge against the star Algol, the demon star.
Like, once again, like, it's soothing to have a bad guy, like, it's soothing to know what we're all fighting against, right? And, like, this, our hero here, or our guy, finally getting to this other side through his tinkering and his, he's Geppetto at this point. Like, getting to the other side and, like, linking up, he's, like, ready to throw down. He's, like, ready to scrap. Like, let's go find this demon star.
I also, just to go back a little bit, I like the whole idea that when it starts talking, that when not shackled to our physical bodies, all humans are light beings. It's like, even Lovecraft, like, militant atheist, he still wants to come to this idea.
Sure.
Where it's like almost just to the point where, like, maybe he's not letting himself, maybe he's just entertaining the idea, and he's like, wouldn't that be wonderful? All this shit that we worry about all the time. And then here we are as these light beings. And then he goes on to explain that it's as light beings within the realm of sleep, humans can experience the vistas of many planes and universes which remain unknown to waking awareness.
Like, where did he get that? Especially in this time, right?
Well, I think that like we discussed in the last episode, when you entertain that notion enough where it's like, I'm a dreamer, and if he was a believer in maybe all these untapped things within us, because each of us contains universes, because it's all in here.
Yeah.
And if you can go in there and it's I guess it's essentially all our life experiences in there, and also hey, maybe it's some of it's genetic or whatever, but the fact that you can just go in there and exist in there. And for someone who maybe someone such as Lovecraft maybe found much of the outside world as harsh, I can see where you can get to this idea.
Yeah, you're right, because most of what we do as people is given and shown to us, and it's like if you don't do that, you're weird.
Yeah.
I have friends that are I'm not doing it that way, and then they'll get upset if someone's just like, oh, you're weird for that. It's like, and they'll tell me about it. I'm like, well, why are you weird? You're just not doing it their way.
Yeah,
that's the thing. So someone who is his whole life reclusive, or just not in your world.
Yeah,
in my world.
Yeah,
he's in his own world. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that makes all the sense, because he's spending time self-evaluating and just evaluating thought and existence, and coming up with, you want to say creative, but it's almost like natural for someone like that just this is their world. Right. This is their thought process. This is how it manifests to them.
And I think someone like him, who was so imaginative, but then also when he was younger, when he was living with his grandfather before all that went away, he would spend times and nights. He would just sneak into his grandfather's library and would just read these amazing stories. He was very taken by Greek myth and things like that. So if you think about that kind of you look at those old those depictions of old Greek paintings and all these very partially nude figures draped in fabric. There's these amazing, beautiful vistas, these golden creatures. You can almost hear the music by looking at it.
Right.
I think he very much, at some time, that was his idea to be, okay, this is the ideal existence. How do I spend my existence in that idea? This golden, glittering, amazing, beautiful mode.
Yeah,
right?
And it's weird. Oh, God,
and we get a glimpse of it when we're alive, when we dream.
Yeah.
And then maybe there's the idea of once we leave our corporeal forms, we can go to that, whatever that is.
Right. And it's so weird, just as how we are as people, we have our own internal clock and our own internal measurements of trying to comprehend, 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. And then you go to a point where you're I'm mad at myself for even asking that question of how did he come to this conclusion? It's Greek gods, dude.
That, but then also I think there's that thing that they talk about, the ideal. There's the ideal figure. So in art history, or when you're discussing any of that, there's the ideal human form, but then there's the ideal design elements. There's an ideal that was put forth in Greek art, and I think that if you fill your head with that as a young child, also putting that with, hey, here was the best times of my life when I was living with my grandfather in that house when we had money and things were great. My father was still alive, or my mother was still sane, or whatever. The two things go together, and you'll see this is a theme that's going to continue later on with stories. There's this ideal form or mode of existence that I think he had an idea of, and here it is. And he probably went there daily, to just be okay, there it is.
See, you put it in perspective for me, a thing we all have. It's on my fourth story, but we all have ways of weighing and measuring ourselves, and it comes out differently, but this story now seems like it's him weighing and measuring himself with the fascination and stuff, and you're getting a glimpse of someone who's kind of understanding their place, where I don't know which character he is representing. Maybe it's the asylum employee, and trying to understand the other things,
right?
And then bridging to the point where getting a glimpse of this being a part of this, but then he comes back. You know, like
that, or I think there could even be I mean, he could be seeing himself in facets of a lot of things here. Sure. I think there's also an idea that maybe, okay, here you have this Slater, his body is degrading and dying because it's the vessel for this thing.
They can't
and maybe that's another thing, because Lovecraft was a sickly child. Lovecraft was seen as, not very masculine child.
Right.
And I hope your child is a masculine. Sorry, I had to do it. No. So maybe he's also seeing himself here. He's like, look, I'm in this, and I can certainly relate to this idea where it's like, to myself, I say it a different way, but in the Lovecraft way, it's here's this body, it's not great, but I have this burning thing inside of me. This is the real good thing.
Yeah.
I have this thing I say about myself, and I've never said this to anybody. I don't know why I'm saying it now, but software is great, hardware is dog shit, and it's
Well, that's the curse, man.
Yeah. So I think, to me, when I read this, that's the point that I hit on.
Right, what you said there. So let's look at him as writing about this character that sees this. He's like, why is this person blessed with this entity inside of him?
Yeah.
This bumpkin, this rotted toothed nobody who can spin these yarns when he's in sleep. But like, how can I figure out to get into that, right? And then he realizes when he's in, we all have this inside of us, right?
Yeah. So
it's that whole, it's a feel-goody kind of thing.
Yeah. And we're gonna get a Star Wars quote here. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. I think it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
So there's this whole other existence in the universe, and I think this is him putting more forth that whole idea that, like, to him, the dream world, which clearly is what we're talking about here, is more the real to him, because this is where he feels more, where he can maybe express, but also this is where he feels the real version of himself.
Yeah, function, it becomes form at that point, because his the creativity and the writing and all that. That's where it becomes form and becomes useful. Whereas in his corporeal form or his physical form, he feels useless.
Sure.
So on the other side of that, that's where the power exists, or the brilliance, or just the overall strength, or just self-realization that my power lies within.
Right.
My strength is this... it's not attached to this physical form. It's just my abilities.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Sure. No. And I think also it possibly could be perception too. Maybe people perceive him as this thing that he's not.
Yeah.
Perceive you as, this bumpkin.
Yeah.
But in reality, he's this extra dimensional light being inside that nobody can see because they can't, I think there's a lot of very personal things here for him in this story, and maybe it's not pointed to characters, but he had to sit down as a person, take a pen to paper, and write this story. So clearly he was trying to say something. He wasn't doing this... yes, this was published later, but why write this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So clearly he had something he was trying to say here, which in any story. But the last one, he was trying to say something in Polaris, and I think that kind of carries over to this one, because I think he was like, the dream, this is real, this isn't, and maybe I'm stuck in this dream, but then also I forgot, what about the noble radiance that people have within?
Yeah.
And it maybe doesn't have to connect to anything divine, but it's just, I think he had to address it. So.
Yeah, I'm sure, maybe he was just... This is what he was into doing at the time, you know, like he wasn't trying to crank out stories. It was just this is the one that came, and it's when I was like, oh, this is cute or whatever. It's within the realm of brutality that exists in this story, where they call him a thing that used to be a man that he beat to death, and running out in the woods, and insanity, and a body decaying, and a guy just trying to reach a level that he wishes he had through technology. it is a big mishmash or a big idea. It's a big idea of all these different insecurities, maybe. But the bridge of all of it being that, like, once you get to that other side is like when he says to him, you know, we were brothers in light. We were brothers in light, and we traveled. And like that was the coolest part for me, was when he was like, you know, and he said, well, what's the name of the country in 2,500 years or whatever it is? Yeah. He's like, right now we're in here, but in 2,500 years it's going to be G, whatever the name is. Yeah. And it's like, okay, so you're already doing the fact that the dimensional and time being relevant is it's put forth in a charming way. Whereas Polaris, it's scary. In this, it's hopeful.
Sure.
Even when the body's dying and decaying, and then as he dies, he makes a reference to, and then he opened his mouth and there's fucking teeth. You know, like he, excuse my language again, but he made the reference to say those teeth were dying again. Yeah. And that's a play on the fact that, like, that spirit had left him. Yeah. Because the last thing, his cheeks went rosy. Yeah. And his lips got pursed, like he was focused. And, you know, he gave his last bit of knowledge or whatever it was, or hope for the future. And when he passed, it was like, you're rotting. That was the thing. Yeah. We're all rotting.
Sure.
And that was the catalyst, was the teeth, to be the emphasis of just how much you're rotting. Right. So you go, like, he's 40, but his hairline, you know, we're judging that. Yeah, like, here I am, the hardware, you know. But that was the fun of it, or not the fun, but like the warm chicken noodle soup at the end of it was like the giving up the ghost. What is the ghost? Right. You know, when it leaves you, is it you, or is it this other you? Yeah. That's some superhero out in space.
Right. Exactly. And I like that there's actually a visual representation of that it's like, okay, here we have this connected device, and, you know, we're doing this thing, and, like, you know, it's all in here. So, but towards the end, the intern, you know, understands is made to understand that the light being would become completely, like, non-bodied, completely incorporeal, and finally undertake this, you know, this last battle with its nemesis near Algol. So Slater dies, and then there's no more transmissions, and that night there's this, like, huge, like, supernova in the sky right near Algol, the demon star, and then within a week it dimmed to the luminosity of, like, an ordinary star, and in a few months it had become completely invisible. So it's like, it's almost, there's a visual representation, like, oh, did he do what he was going to do? So, like, I guess, but then also it's like, then there's, like, that little representation of, like, you know, there's that you know, they use that metaphor, like, oh, their star has burned out. It's like, right. So it's like, it's very, like, I don't know. I feel it's very sentimental in a way. Yeah. And
well, here the sentimental idea is when he says to him.
I'm sorry, and that's the end of the story.
Right. So, but when he says to him, like, you're the only person that has sought me out. Maybe that connection was the thing that gave the entity that was in Slater, they're like, oh, it isn't, you know, a moot point, or, you know, maybe, or a Pyrrhic victory. Sure. It was like, wow, there's a reason for me to do this, and that gave, you know, that entity the strength or whatever it needed to complete its mission and go take care of that star. And stars are fucking bad guys, apparently. I'm sorry.
They can be.
I keep cursing, and I don't mean to.
Yep.
But it's a wholesome, fun romp filled with horrors, and it's a new way of looking at the buddy cop genre, I feel. It's definitely
it's these dream journeys. He's definitely priming us for these dream other dimension through dream kind of journeys, which there's going to be more of these that maybe get a little more successful down the road. Certainly get more successful down the road. But I like the kernel of this, the one you're talking about, the warm chicken soup, like where it's like that's a great idea. Like I like that idea. That's for the things that come down later. In some of his stories, specifically in the Cthulhu Mythos stories, it's like, that's a nice thing to think about, and then you'll see the horrors that come later.
Yeah, right. But from like what I hear and what you've said, like this one was drastically more hopeful because of the other side, right?
Yeah.
Where in all the other things, and like it's like the other side, the old ones, all these different things that you've told me about, and from what I know, this one I was like, like this is like almost like a superhero story. Like this is like it's almost like a baddie versus goodie. Like it's classic. Like there's this entity that needs to be destroyed, and the big difference being the dimensions in which it's fought. So this entity, when he sleeps, is in this body. It hates it. It needs to go fight this guy.
It's the meat battery that it's inside of is being driven crazy and doing these crazy things.
And it's like, oh God, just let me go. Like you know, like it's told in a super weird way, but like I feel like it is like a superhero thing.
Okay,
like,
that's I've never heard that.
It's just how I feel.
But hey, that's
super
wonderful.
Weird way of doing it.
Yeah,
but it's like once it's released, once it died, it was like, dude, I'm free. Before he died, he was like, I'm about to be free because I'm attached to this meat sack.
Yeah,
and he gave him that last message of like, you know, once again I'll say, you're my brother in light. You know, we did this. We're gonna travel. Maybe I'll see you again. Maybe I won't. I'm sure. Like the whole thing, it's like, it's that hopefulness of the end. Yeah, which I was shocked to get. I was shocked to get that from what I know of Lovecraft and what I read. It was like, it wasn't like a cliffhanger of like, no, it was like, and also the bad guy died. You know, at the end it was like the bad guy got beat. Yeah, I don't know if it was him. It was a coincidence. The star stopped burning.
It's certainly a way to look at it. But that's why you have these. Lovecraft didn't set out to try to build initially, and maybe not even really, but he didn't set out to build like, okay, I'm going to build this up. Build this up. Here's these guys, and I'll make this big. It's not the Marvel universe. It's like, and he has these stories. He's trying things out. So when you look at things in hindsight, it's easy to be like, oh, well, maybe he was building towards this, or maybe it's just, you know, this young guy at this point trying some ideas out. Yeah, and clearly he has a lot of eccentric ideas, but also maybe not so eccentric, because you read some of the stuff and it hits like, oh, okay. And I've always maybe there's a few, but there's almost everything I've read of him, there's always some little like, oh, okay, and I get it on an emotional level, which you don't think of when you think of H.P. Lovecraft, because before you know about him, you think of, oh, slimy tentacles and like everybody dies and whatever.
Reanimator.
Ugh.
Yeah. Well,
until we read the actual story.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's people. Oh, Lovecraft's. Lovecraft's immortal.
The immortal classic.
Yeah, right.
All the boobs in that movie.
Yeah.
Nope. So.
No, I actually, like I said, this kind of the dire pit of my stomach stuff from Polaris. This kind of made me was like, you know, like. Get out there! I'll throw a couple, couple rounds. It was a nice palate cleanser of the doom and gloom. Yeah. Being my fourth story, you know, but I enjoyed it. And what do you think when you think of this burning entity? That's what I wanted to ask you. The one
what
that was
think?
The bad guy, the baddie.
I don't know, and maybe Lovecraft didn't know either. Maybe it's just that it's weird. Like, could it be like this light creature is one half of an equation that he has to travel out into space with this other one to complete that equation. He views it as his nemesis, but maybe it's just this function of the universe kind of thing, where like he's this thing, but he has to perform this thing, this duty, and that will, that's his quote unquote destiny. Or maybe it's just written the way that Lovecraft will write things sometimes, where it's just an unknowable thing. Oh, there's these light beings, and I'm this thing, and I've been here for, they don't even say, but I have to get out of this body because I have this thing to do, which,
Could that star be Polaris?
I would resist connecting these two stories because I don't think he was trying to do that.
Right. Okay.
Maybe, but not the Polaris from the first movie. From the first story we did. The previous story. I don't know.
Yeah, because like him, destroying that star that faded out. It's like, could that be the spirit of the other guy that went through? Like, I don't know.
I mean, because the star he's destroying is Algol, which is is a different star.
Yeah, right.
But he's certainly in this time here where he's working up to, and like I said earlier, it's easy to try to look back at these stories and say, oh, this is where he's building towards this. But I think you can make that assumption here because it's he's building towards influence from the cosmos. That's certainly something he's got that. Like he's like, okay, influence from the cosmos, and it's not particularly benevolent.
Right. Well, so let's say this. My last thought on it. Mm-hmm. Not connecting them in the way of that's the same star, but connecting in the way of that star. Mm-hmm. So Polaris tormenting the one man.
Yeah.
Also bridging the gap to the other universe, mm-hmm. or whatever. But this light being mm-hmm. that's in the dude John Slater, that star obviously has done some great, misdeed to him. Mm-hmm. Could it be that certain stars are just out to get people?
I don't know, and I think, and I don't know if he.
It might just be me spinning my wheels.
It could be. It could be. I don't think stars. I mean, I'll give you the fast forward. Yeah. Stars, quote unquote, are not, sentient beings in his stories later on. The stars themselves. So I could see where you're going, where you're trying to see where this might connect. But I just. I think he's just going with the whole. We have these, these bodies of light out in the, out in the universe, and we see them, but they're also here too. Right. So it's like there is this connection between us and the cosmos.
Sure. No. Yeah.
So.
And I get that.
Yeah. So.
But it was a great adventure. It was.
I'm glad you like this one a lot better than.
See, no. Once again, I liked Polaris a lot.
Just different.
But I also hated it because how it made me feel. This one, I like this a lot, but it also made me feel good.
Right.
Because of the there's lovingness in there. I don't know what he was going through at the time.
Yeah. And
he wrote, I hate to say it, but it was pretty. The writing became very pretty.
Yeah.
At points. It wasn't like it wasn't beautiful like the poem from the tomb.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he had pretty writing when discussing the connection from one light being to another, which was nice.
Yeah.
It made me feel nice.
Well then. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad, also in going through these stories that I'm getting to reread them again. Like, I think I read this one. I probably was in high school, so I haven't read this one in a long time. So reading it again and redigesting it, because back then I was probably reading like, oh, weird, crazy guy has, creature inside of him and they use these things on him to whatever. But then reading it now, it's like you have a much more nuanced view of it because, it's like, okay, well, this is a writer sitting down to write something. It's not just this. So, yeah.
Well, I had a great time.
All right. I'm glad you did. All right. Well, I say that would conclude this episode. Next time, join us for the next tale, The Transition of Juan Romero.
I can't wait. That's a title. That one's a title.
It's yep. There's I'm just looking over here as we're recording. I'm just looking over the chronology of his stories. There are going to be some that there's these almost fragmentary stories that I'm leaving out because maybe we can come back to them at a different time or just talk to them on the side, but they're not full episode worthy. You know what I mean? It's not enough to there's certain fragments. So you could look at his so for example, we're doing Beyond the Wall of Sleep today. After this there's a story Memory, and there's also one called Old Bugs. They're not,
full episode.
Yeah. So we're gonna skip over those two for now. Maybe it'll be something we come back to later. But the next story we're gonna do is Transition of Juan Romero, and then after that some classics are coming up.
I don't like that smile on your face, buddy. Actually, I do. I love that because you're my brother in light.
Aw.
We'll go mess up a star. I'll fight a star with you, bro.
Sweet. Sick, bro.
Sick, bro.
All right, so I think that concludes this episode of Learning Lovecraft. I've been Jason McKittrick.
And I've been Ken James.
And we'll see you on the other side of sleep.